Thank you so much, folks. And, I want to thank Michael Darling and our friends at Northwell Health for this invitation to do this today, but nobody told me I was going to be moderating a panel after Katie Couric. So, for the record, I don't know if I would have been here. So please be gracious with me as we embark on this conversation. But I'm Bob Coughlin. I lead the life science and healthcare practice at JLL. But prior to that, I spent 14 years as the CEO of the Massachusetts Biotechnology Council. And I got into the biotech industry about 21 years ago because my wife and I had a kid with cystic fibrosis. After about 18 years and $13 billion, a company called Vertex was amazingly invented a drug that's keeping my kid alive today, okay? So people would say, why does a Bostonian get bullish about the digital twin and the virtual you and this topic this extremely exciting topic that we're gonna talk about for the next 25 minutes or so? Well, think about what we can do with this application as it relates to patients, whether it's healthcare delivery, drug discovery, et cetera. And we're gonna talk about it. And if we say in Massachusetts, this is wicked exciting stuff, all right? So please, we have a world-class panel here, global experts on the virtual you and the digital twin. Why don't we get right into it? You guys introduce yourself, tell us your connection to the digital twin, and then we'll embark on a discussion. We'll start with you, Kerstin.
Well, good morning. It's exciting to be here. My name's Kerstin Kleese van Dam. I'm working for Brookhaven National Laboratory. We're one of 17 Department of Energy laboratories. We are engaged in fundamental research and support healthcare in various ways. In particular, in my case, we do computer science, leading AI research that helps to create the virtual human of the future.
Thank you, Peter.
Hi there. My name is Peter Coveney. I'm based at University College London. People will probably realize it's a very large biomedical research center in the UK in its own right. My interests are in computational science and doing bigger, better, and faster applications, and in the area of biomedical research, this has become a really major opportunity in the recent past. I should just say this week we're in New York City for a Virtual Humans Week. We've been at a global summit on the virtual human, and we interact already in an interesting way with Northwell in particular.
All right. And I'm Eric Stahlberg, and I work for Frederick National Lab for Cancer Research. The name implies that we're supported by the National Cancer Institute, so Rich, thank you for the comments earlier. But the National Lab does more than just cancer research. There's about 2,300 employees that are not only focusing on cancer research, but they also do fundamental research in HIV/AIDS, as well as the National Laboratory that's one of the US assets to deploy to emerging health threats, infectious disease outbreaks globally in that context. And I've had the benefit for the last 9 years to really be leading cancer data science initiatives, including having some initial discussions with the Department of Energy colleagues about how we might use advanced supercomputing to challenge cancer and move the frontiers forward in that space. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And, we want to talk a lot about the digital twin and how it can be applied in healthcare and, what is the virtual human. But first, and to follow on the previous conversation, they talked a lot about AI. Let's clarify for the audience, in what way does a human digital twin differ from an AI-based description of a patient? Do you want to start on that, Peter?
Yeah, sure. Because the last presentations give us a good segue into this. I'm going to be very direct and provocative about this. Medicine today is arguably not a science, and it could become one. What is the way of the medics developing their approach? It's usually, my analogy is, driving along a road, spending most of your time determining where to go by looking in the rear mirror. That means you look at all the previous examples of things that you've encountered for a patient in front of you, and you infer from what you see then how to treat that patient. And if you think for a moment, that's exactly what artificial intelligence is doing in a formalized way. It's getting data from the past to try to infer what to do with the patient who's in front of you. Now, that method can be quite powerful, but we've already seen the severe limitations of it. They dominated the last discussion. How reliable can a prediction be for an individual in front of you if it's based on a large data set that doesn't capture that person's part of the population in any reliable way? So the digital twin is certainly going to make full use of AI, but the important point is the differentiation. Every single individual is to be treated on their own basis. regardless of where they come from, in principle in the globe. And as we heard from Chelsea Clinton, even in the USA, there are minorities that are not getting the right attention. You have a digital twin of yourself, not a generic one. That's like a more sophisticated electronic health record. And you can imagine how you could carry it around. Everyone to be treated on the same footing.
So people could, in fact, carry that around with them and it will have all their information?
In a digital way, yes.
Hey, Kerstin?
No, that's exactly how we envisage it. That is your digital twin that you carry on your phone with you from birth onwards, preferably. That is updated every time that you see a doctor, that you have an investigative measure done. And just as your phone gets updated on a regular basis, your operating system on it, your digital twin would get updated with studies around the world that brings the latest information in how particular groups that you belong to respond to treatments, develop illnesses, where the risks coming from. That's really what we envisage. And it's all backed up, as Peter said, by the fundamental laws that we have in physics and biology, by experiments, that we know what we put in those digital twins is right, and it's verified.
Eric, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts is it's a truly exciting time. It was mentioned in some of the earlier talks that the data has been in silos. We're seeing a convergence of that data. AI is helping that convergence, but as Peter was saying, the AI is going to help us identify what we don't know and those gaps, and those are going to have to be filled with fundamental research to understand how the different aspects relate. It's one of the reasons we expanded from trying to model cancer, expanding that to realizing that we really need to look at the whole patient. The whole patient has the components that are interacting that have to be modeled so that we understand how your brain is influencing your treatment, how the other digestion, how you eat nutrition, how your behavior, all of those social determinants of health factor in. So the whole virtual you, the virtual human, is the idea that we can integrate all of that in a predictive way. But the important thing is that it's not just a single point. It's predictive over time so that we can adapt and respond. Because one of the things that we heard in our summit that we held yesterday and the day before was that once you begin to treat a patient, they're now different. So you have to begin to update. You have to understand what that evolution will be. So you need a virtual you need a virtual digital twin to allow you to track through that and support those decisions that the physicians need to make.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how healthcare institutions and technology companies, life science companies, regulators, government, et cetera, how do they work together so that you have some sort of a responsible development related to ethical use of virtual human technology and privacy, et cetera? It was talked a lot last couple of days in the other summit.
So certainly the Department of Energy, when we take an example, AI technology, much of our application areas are what we call high-impact decision-making environments, where either lives are at risk if we make the wrong decisions or billions of dollars of equipment. So for the past decade, we've worked on what's called responsible AI, which looks at, is it robust? Is it reproducible, what I'm doing? Is it equitable? Is it safe? Does it preserve the information and protect the privacy of information? And I think that's what we need to do. I don't think that necessarily regulation will do the right thing. But if you see an AI product, you should ask those questions. Have you thought of those things? How are they built into your product? They have to be there from the start. Retrofitting doesn't work. And I think that's the right approach that we are sort of bringing to this area.
Wonderful. Peter, do you have thoughts?
Absolutely, and in my case, we already interact strongly with the FDA in the USA. They have a direct and immediate concern about in silico methods, which are clearly coming along, and AI is a manifestation of that. And it's really like what happens in all forms of engineering. If you're going to develop a safety critical device or build a bridge or a building in an area where there are earthquakes and so on, you have to conform with requirements that are imposed by government or regulatory authorities. And the FDA already has started to stipulate the requirements for in silico methods. what are we talking about here? Potentially, of course, in silico trials, clinical trials. Imagine this, we're dispensing with the use of animals and animal models typically because they're not very indicative of how humans behave. But then each human is different, as we were saying, and you can imagine, and now this is happening and there are people in the audience today who already produce sort of startup commercial opportunities here to run in silico digital trials, that is, let's say, of toxicity, cardiotoxicity. So you can actually set up in a substantial supercomputer a population of potentially hundreds of thousands of representations of individuals and test a drug out on those things. And it clearly depends on how reliable your in silico predictions are, whether you can convert that into an actionable decision. The actionable decisions we're all familiar with today are weather forecasting. They produce reliable probabilities for tomorrow by running a substantial number of simulations on a supercomputer every day. And that's the kind of scenario we're talking about here. You have to quantify the uncertainty. And let me make this very clear. In the artificial intelligence world today, for reasons that were mentioned in the previous talk, we don't have reliable uncertainty quantification. Partly because we heard how many parameters are in those models. Those parameters just used to fit data in and out. They're not related to the detail of what's going on scientifically, but if you want to do that, you have to deal with all of the effects of uncertainty in the parameters in the model. It's not possible currently to do that with AI models, and the result of that is they can sometimes produce complete gibberish, as we know from ChatGPT, and I've myself suffered from those in academic referee reports, which have clearly been sent in using ChatGPT.
Eric, do you want to follow up on that? And again, you talked about the silos earlier. What do the different stakeholders need to do so that you can make this a reality?
Well, one of the things that they have to begin to do is talk to each other.
Yeah.
So some of the comments that Chelsea was making, getting the groups together both nationally and internationally so that we actually have a common language and we can exchange things. One of the potentials we see for things like ChatGPT is the ability to translate across disciplines. Doesn't necessarily mean we'll translate the data, but at least we can translate our understanding so we can begin to work together much more effectively. So that's going to be a key thing. I wanted to play off a little bit of your comments earlier. I used to teach computational science, and one of the things that I always emphasize to the students, you have to understand the assumptions going into the model because someday your job will depend on it. So that's one of the key things we need to know about the models is what are the assumptions that went into it. And we don't always have time to understand that, so we have to have an authority that we trust that will allow us to basically say, we trust this model, it's been vetted. And to that extent, we actually have a project at Frederick National Lab involving the National Cancer Institute, as well as some of the DOE laboratories that is going to be using the largest supercomputer that will be in the United States. It's called Aurora. It will be at Argonne National Lab. The project is called Improve. It's focusing on two things. Can we understand how to improve the model with the data we have? That's the first step. The other step is to actually, how do we improve the model with the data we need? And that's a key thing about AI that I've had in the background for a while, which is many of the applications we're developing now with AI, the data were not collected for that purpose. So one of the revolutions that we will have is that we begin collecting data with the purpose of building AI models. And that will actually get us closer to what we truly need, which is then the understanding that we will have to make those decisions and provide those insights.
Great, great. We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to get back to patients and what this means for patients. But before we do that, you talked about supercomputers and the computers required. To me, as an outsider looking at this topic, this seems like it takes a hulking amount of computer bandwidth. What does that mean?
I mean, Eric just mentioned Aurora. That hasn't come on stream yet, but there is one exascale machine, which is about half the power of the one that he's talking about. It's Frontier at Oak Ridge National Lab, another DOE lab. So I happen to be privileged enough to have access to that, and one of the projects we're trying to deploy on that is related to drug discovery. Look how bad drug discovery is today.
Yeah.
On average, 10 years, $2 to $3 billion. One drug, one size fits all drug, because that's the only thing they can cope with, and only 4% of all projects that start are successful. This leaves plenty of room for improvement. And my proposition here is that we have effectively virtual twins that you can set up on a computer of that scale. It has around 10,000 nodes on it, and if you love GPUs, as the AI community does, that's about 80,000 GPUs. because there are 8 of them per node if you count them in a particular way. You can do a hell of a lot with 80,000, and it means you can actually set up, potentially, that's what we're aiming for, the entire preclinical pathway in silico, to be able to do the testing, not just the identification of the lead compounds, but then the testing of their effects, side effects, in silico. So you have the benefit that having done that in a campaign that could be of weeks duration, you end up with a set of compounds that you know you should ask the chemist to start making. Currently, it's all done the other way. We make lots of compounds, we try to make as many as we can, and then afterwards we use a bit of theory and computing to rationalize why they worked and hone them, but in a very limited way to optimize one step at a time. That's one of the reasons why it's failing, and a supercomputer at this scale can do a lot to ameliorate this.
Okay, but is there anything that government or industry or the other people in the ecosystem need to do to build that infrastructure so that this can become a reality, or is it needed?
So we've actually been working for several years with a public-private partnership. It's called Accelerating Therapeutics for Opportunities in Medicine. It's ATOM. And that was actually one of the projects that we started with Lawrence Livermore National Lab. It now involves Brookhaven, involved Argonne, it has involved Oak Ridge, the DOE labs, to really look at how we can use the AI to drive the predictive models and then complement that with the generative models to come up with those compounds that we didn't think of, that the traditional chemists may not think of. This model of innovation is one that is taking over in many ways. I think the CEO of Medtronic was alluding to some of that. That feedback loop comes into play, and we can get tremendous innovation in doing that to come up with new compounds. And not only what those compounds can do, but where they can be applied and where they cannot be applied. So we're working with the FDA as well and looking at how we can actually bring AI more effectively into understanding precision toxicology. Not just precision oncology, but precision toxicology. So we understand what Rich Barakat was talking about, when a drug would work with a population and what side effect it may have with other populations. So we can actually have that insight, so we can provide that as supporting information to the physicians when they're making decisions.
Love it. And Jeff also reminded us to go to bed earlier and stop drinking as much as we do. So we're off to a great start here, folks. So when you, let's talk about patients now. And in the short term, let's talk about patients in healthcare delivery. In the short term, what does the virtual human digital twins, how does that, in the short term, how can that benefit patients in healthcare delivery? We're at a healthcare forum. How does it affect patients?
So we just had a workshop at Summit over the last 2 days where we looked at exactly those kind of questions. And we had everyone there from fundamental research to those that are physicians, Northwell Health, who are working with the patients. And we talked about what are the questions that you want to ask to answer and what can we do. And there are constrained, I would say, areas where we can already bring this digital twin technology to bear, where it is used. For example, we had a company there that works on diagnosing your gut health, developing supplements specialized for you based on all the information that they captured to say, here are the things that you should do to improve your health, and then they monitor it and work with you. So there are things like that. I have to say that the most successful examples were those that worked directly with the patients and collected the data from them. We heard this from one of the other panels. Data is the big issue, getting data out of the silos. And they basically said, well, we collect all our data directly from the patients. And we really have to think about this, how we can do this better in the future for a broad set of applications.
Yeah, short-term wins for healthcare and the patients. Peter and Eric, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't like us always referring to patients. Someone already mentioned it. This is something for everyone. Individually, they can benefit from it. And ideally, it's a vehicle for everyone's ability to interact with these individualized systems to keep them healthy and prevent them from having to go into hospital for problems. So it's something for everyone. I emphasized earlier, I mean everyone, not just a privileged part of the population. And here's the challenge, a business opportunity. How do you make this accessible to everyone in a financially viable way? But it's globally of significance, but still the challenges of actually producing a wholly integrated human are a long-term plan for biomedical research. We're talking currently about sort of subdomains, organ systems, disease cases, where there are early wins. The discussion I just gave about in silico trials, this is already beginning to get traction with pharma companies. So there's a very wide diversity of potential uptake.
All right, Eric, what are your thoughts? And let's assume everyone's sooner or later a patient, so let's call it humankind. How do we benefit humankind with the digital twin?
Oh, there's a lot of different aspects of that, but I do want to hit on something that we haven't necessarily mentioned here, and that is actually helping the population understand more about their health. The ability, and you were talking about short-term wins, take the opportunity to work with your patients, work with those that you meet, to understand more about their health, because these types of innovations are going to become accessible. So it becomes something that they become comfortable with. That's going to be one of the big near-term wins that we have, because that's going to drive the opportunity to have those observations that are going to provide that insight that's going to make those decisions that the physicians have to make even better.
Okay, we're getting to the point where we need to wrap up, and you see how quick this goes, guys. But here, you know, I'm down in New York right now, and I'm a Red Sox fan, all right? So why, come on, why New York? I get it, right? Why is New York the place to be the tip of the spear as it relates to digital twins, to this industry? I mean, we've seen, you know, in the history of the life sciences industry, and we did it really well in Cambridge, you know, when we were going from small molecule drugs to large molecule, precision medicine, cell and gene therapy, blah, blah, blah. We always try to focus on what's next. We all agree this is a what's next, and this needs to happen. Why is New York City the vanguard for this? Why are we talking about it with our friends at Northwell Health?
Oh, it's a fantastic opportunity, because New York is the crossroads of the world. So one of the reasons that we have the Global Summit here is exactly that. It's the place where everybody can easily get to. The other thing that comes into play is that we've learned that Northwell Health's population is very representative of the United States population. So they actually become a laboratory for what to do, that translation to the patient, reaching that last mile, that last centimeter where that connection to the patient can actually happen. And it's a tremendous opportunity. This actually came about from some discussions with John Stubbs, who's sitting in the audience here, who had been working with the folks at JLL about some work in Midway Crossing and trying to do something out there. And it became clear that Midway Crossing is aptly named as halfway between Brookhaven and Manhattan. And it creates an opportunity for a translational ecosystem in Long Island, in New York, to one of the largest health markets with a partner that's willing, like Northwell Health, to actually step forward and take these technologies to the patient.
And how about our friend from across the pond coming
maybe
to visit us?
Kerstin should add to the do you want to say anything more about the relationship with
Well, I think it's just,
Brookhaven?
I think the excitement about New York, as Eric said, it's one of the biggest cities in the world with a very diverse population. But the area as well has everything from fundamental research to the startups, to the companies that provide and the physicians that provide healthcare. And we can bring everything together in a very small footprint and work together to make real difference to everyone.
And my role is related to the fact that I have a lot of long-standing US collaborations working, as you may have heard, on DOE supercomputers of massive scale. But I've also been running big initiatives in this space across the European domain. And this enterprise, in the long run, is a global one. We've got to build virtual humans in a personal way, and lots of subsystems have to be put together. The thing needs to be interoperable. So I'm responsible, as it were, for the international aspect of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you as well. I'd like to thank all our panelists. But Peter, thank you for writing your book, The Virtual You, The Digital Twin, because I read it, I got it last week, and thank you for sharing the story and why this is so important for all of our industry and for patients. It's a great read. We're going to have a workshop later on today where this amazing panel is going to talk more about this subject. So please join us. Thank you to our friends at Northwell for putting this on, and thank you, all of you, for coming. It's been great. I'll state for the record, I am no Katie Couric, but I worked as hard as I could today, guys. So I'm going to head back to Boston and just relish it.
Thank you.
Thank you.